ask the non-board members to introduce themselves, please, just so everyone knows who everyone is, if they don't already. And Allie, understand who it is too. Start with Bethy.
Hi, I'm Beth Gillis. I'm the Executive Director of the Lake Champlain Lake George Regional Planning Board.
I'm John Wheatley.
I stand here and stare at Dave the whole time. Sorry.
John Wheatley, Vice President of EDC, Warren County.
Ed Bartholomew, EDC, Warren County.
Laura Oswald, EDC, Washington County.
Mr. Kelly.
And I'm Jack Kelly. I'm an economic development consultant and also a commercial real estate agent.
So, just a little discussion before we get into Jack's presentation, or discussion, whatever he wants to call it, is that I just recently took over the chair of the IDA, as most of you know, and some of the conversations we're having is what's the real future of the IDA, where do you go, what can we get involved in? We're to a point where some of our lots are getting down there in the park, and we have to look at what else the IDA can do, where can they go. And part of our charter, or I should say our mission statement, is to help assist in economic development across two counties. And I think that we have an opportunity to look at where we're going, and one of the things that a lot of our board members ask for is what would it take to market a new piece of property, to existing properties, to attract businesses to the area. And one of the things Jack has done, as most of you know, over the course of his career, is done economic development. He's involved with Saratoga Economic Development Corporation. He was involved a lot in the chip plant down there. So he's been involved in a lot of things, so he does know a lot about it. So we asked him here today, he offered to do a chalk talk and discuss it, so we know what we'd be getting into. And Laura Oswald, of course, is the Economic Development Coordinator for Washington County, and she is she's very good at what she does, and she knows a lot of ways and grants and things. She's a good resource for tourism and other things for Washington County, so we asked her here. Beth Gillies, as Regional Planning Board, one of the charters of our area is to get involved with economic development. We actually work for the Economic Development Agency as part of our charter. We're on grant with them, help economic development in the area. So that's what she works with. So we also do a lot of things at the Regional Planning Board, as most of you know. So what we really wanted to do is get around and say where we are and what are the options we can look at. You know, should the IDA develop a new park? Should the IDA do other resources? Is there a way we can work closer with all the alphabet soup organizations to help market this area, to bring economic development and business in the area? And we're really not sure where we're going at this point. But I think one way to do is to look and have a good roundtable discussion after Jack does his presentation, and see where we go, and maybe even develop a sort of a group, to a steering committee to do things and get out and get some ideas together. Because we've talked about putting on a marketing coordinator, do direct marketing activities. We talked about a few other things, but we want to make sure we're going in the right direction and making sure that we are helping meet the needs of the organization, and more importantly, the two counties. So that's where we're at. We'll see from there. So Jack, if you'd like to start it off.
Well, thank you very much, Dave, and I hope my voice holds out. I've had a week here of cold or flu or whatever they happen to call it, so my opening comments will be is if you haven't gotten your flu shot yet, go out and get it. So anyways, I'm here more or less to facilitate a open discussion among the people in this room as it relates to economic development. And I've always had a saying, and it's worked out to be true, is that when you talk economic development happens. And I just want to throw out at the very beginning my involvement with the Warren Washington IDA started a few years ago with bringing a hotel project in and another recreation project that's down on Corinth Road. And then I was asked to list the vacant property that they own up by the airport. And with the new chairman, we've had a chance to have some discussions, and Dave and a few members of the of the IDA have expressed a sincere effort to take and do more or be available more to the two counties and to the region as a whole. Because you go down to Glens Falls and just to go across the river to the South Glens Falls, it's a different county, but a number of your residents here from both counties travel back and forth and work. I'm not going to give a formal presentation about what economic development is, because as I look out in the room, I see a few people with white hair that are much more in tune with your local community. You know how to do economic development, so that's not my purpose. Our purpose is not to threaten anybody with any jobs or anything, but I think the number one item that I told Dave that I'd like to get for discussion and open dialogue, and again, I want to remind you that no idea is a bad idea, and some are going to stick to the wall and some are not. But the IDA, with the people that I've been talking with, want to make themselves more available and find out from you, the actual frontline people, as to what can the IDA do to help you, another wrench or screwdriver in your toolbox. I mean, we can all sit and we know what IDAs do and et cetera, but sometimes with the smorgasbord of different programs out there, we don't take and necessarily utilize them totally. I myself would like to learn a little bit more as to what some of the day-to-day and long-range challenges that while you deliver economic development in your counties. We also have a number of policymakers here that I've had a chance to talk about and do a little education from my standpoint as to what economic development is and the benefits of giving pilots and other incentives. And I call them basically government investments. So I'm going to use my background in radio to take and help ask questions and keep a dialogue going. There's no rules about if you want to crosstalk among yourselves, etc. And when I find the discussion getting a little weak, we'll spice it up a little bit. And Ed, since you're pretty much the dean, I think, of economic developers in the area, I don't know if you've ever been called that before, but I have a lot of respect for what you've done in the Glens Falls area, etc. What do you foresee right now as the immediate challenges to delivery of economic development in Warren County, the city of Glens Falls, and what do you look at maybe where it's going to be 5 years from now?
I think the first issue is really a policy issue as to whether or not IDAs or LDCs should continue to consider buying property.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the era that the Warren County EDC acquired property through the efforts of John Michaels felt back in the 90s, there was very little economic development going on and growth, and therefore he felt buying the property on Quarry Road, Queensbury Business Park, would be an incentive to start. Since you roll ahead to 2019, I think that there is a much more active, aggressive role from the private sector that I think that we should do a better job in connecting with that private sector, utilizing your talent, Jack, and others in the real estate field, but not necessarily having the IDA take on the burden and the issue, the controversy at time of owning property. Can we help with a developer in trying to assist if there's lacking of infrastructure, if there is lacking, including water, sewer, three-phase power, access for roads, permitting? I think all of those things can be useful by an IDA, but not necessarily owning the property, because at the end of the day, here we are sitting as quasi-public agencies, and we're hearing from the private sector, Jack Kelly. I mean, and we have other fine representatives in real estate in the area, but I really think that there should be discussions, on our organizations ourselves, of not necessarily looking beyond owning, property. If a developer needs some questions or issues on risk assessments that need to be done, those may be appropriate for IDAs to get involved with, to provide some assistance to get there, but not necessarily end up with owning the property and having to market the property. And I think that we're looking around and seeing the development that is occurring in the private sector. So you take that another step in areas where, for instance, a particular business has gone out of, a manufacturer has gone out of business. That's where an IDA can step in, working with the private sector, and say, okay, what you were addressing, the types of incentives, investments is the buzzword now, not pilots or incentives, but investments. But how can we collaborate with the private sector, with the real estate developers in the area, to make this more attractive?
Who was we?
The IDAs in the area, principally, if you look upon IDAs as your main economic development wing in Warren, in Washington County, to a certain extent, on doing that. So I think that's a policy issue. And then with Warren County, like with Washington County, and I'm going to turn this over to Laura in a second, is that the city of Glens Falls is only 3.2, 3.4 square miles. That's it. Not much land left, so there's unique economic development that occurs in that area. We also have 92% of the land mass within Warren County is within the Adirondack Park Agency, excluding a good portion of Queensbury. So just by the geographic areas and the lack of restriction, there is going to be more development in Glens Falls and more in town of Queensbury. That can't stop us from looking at opportunities in the North Country. And so one of our EDC focuses is to work in developing some studies that we're working with Horicon and Chester in developing all of the whistles and bells of what is the infrastructure available in Horicon and Chester. What is the land mass like? What is the infrastructure like in those areas? So that we have this compiled for the respective towns, for the county planning, and provide that to developers, put that on the website, so people have that access information available to assist in trying to develop, again, in concert with the towns, of what they want to see develop in those particular towns, not what EDC or an IDA wants to tell them, what to do. So we have to address kind of that uniqueness that we have basically within the Glens Falls, Queensbury area, and also you've got the Lake George along the lake, and then you've got basically the North Country of Horicon and Chester and Luzerne and Thurman and Stony Creek in those particular areas.
So, Ed, when I look at this, I see you've got EDC, then you've got the IDA, then you've got 2 or 3 LDCs, Regional Planning Board, which has some role in economic development of the area. I see a number of different organizations sort of going to the beat of their own drum. I'm not trying to make fun of things, but I'd like to see how we can do more cooperation together, because the more we can work together to accomplish the same goals and set and accomplish those goals, the stronger we're going to be and the more we can reach. So that's one of the things that I thought of when I was thinking through this entire process and talking through with Mike Biddle and a few other people in the idea where you want to go. So I think that's one of the other things, but I also think that if we can get into some sort of public-private partnerships, it would help. But I know that 1 or 2 people in one organization can't do as much as a group of organizations. And what structure that is, I don't know. Mike?
Thanks, Dave. Ed, I might ask you to elaborate on some of the things that you've done in this room from time to time, and specifically talk about the impediments to industrial development or development as a whole. If I'm not mistaken, you mentioned the APA, but there's also workforce issues that we're lacking in. There's other issues that we have that are compounding our lack of attracting industry or businesses here. So if we're going to think about going forward, I'd like to kind of understand how we might be able to work together with the impediments to kind of break down some barriers so we are more appealing.
You know, that's where I was referencing them as challenges, and we not only have challenges now immediately in front of us, but I'm interested in also where the challenges are going to be 5 years from now, because 2-3 years goes by very, very quickly.
As I sort of looked at that, I mean, there is, and maybe in the future where we go, we might want to have SUNY involved in this too, because I've worked with the Worcester Development Program. But I also know those are some of the same issues as Laura's brought up and talked to me about. And Laura, I'll let you expound on those if you'd like to talk from your standpoint and Washington County standpoint.
So I would, a couple of points. First of all, I completely agree with Ed's earlier comments that economic development has changed a lot in the last 20 years, and the theory of developing shovel-ready sites just isn't very near the top of the list anymore. So for example, Site Selector magazine puts out an annual survey that talks to major companies that are looking to relocate and what is the most important thing to you. The last couple of years, consistently, the number one item is workforce. The things that are now at the bottom of the list are state incentives, sites, and lands. So our workforce challenge in this area, I'm not honestly sure how much the IDA can be directly involved, but I do see it as a region-wide problem. So for example, the unemployment rate in the Glens Falls MSA right now is at about 3.5%. Most authorities will tell you that full employment is considered to be between 4 and 4.5%. What does that mean? That means everybody who wants a job has a job. It's also largely considered to be the threshold at which if unemployment drops below that, you start to see inflation. Well, we're at 3.5% and we're not seeing inflation. How do you explain that? So I took a look at Washington County numbers. I don't know how this compares in Warren County, but it's probably pretty similar. Department of Labor considers our workforce to be about 30,000 people. If I look at the demographics of 20 to 64-year-olds, which are about workforce age, there are about 38,000 people. So if you do the math, that says that there are about 7,000 people of working age who are not working. Now, some of those are those who choose not to work. They're, housewives, house husbands. They're wealthy enough not to work, whatever. But I have to imagine that a large portion of that number is what we consider underemployed. So again, without going into detail, the way the unemployment rate is calculated is a survey is sent out. You have a choice of you have a job or you've looked for a job in the last month. Have a job means if you've worked at least 1 hour a week, you're considered employed. You're unemployed if you haven't looked for a job in more than a month or you don't want to be employed. So there's a lot of discussion around the accuracy of the unemployment rate. So what that really translates to is if you factor in what is largely considered to be the underemployed, our real unemployment rate is probably more like 6 to 7%. So that tells me that there are people out there that we can get to. The most difficult part is to make that connection. It's people who stopped trying to look for work because they don't know how anymore. It's sort of like broadband, and the most expensive areas to reach are those that are difficult and rural. The most expensive part of the workforce to reach are those who don't know how to connect to employers. So again, can the IDA be partnering to help broker those connections? Possibly, but overall, in terms of impediment, I see that probably as our number one impediment to seeing growth in the area.
And just a takeoff on that. Ford knows this because we've been working, Ford Edwards been working on a project with a company to come in for, it's been almost 2 years now. And their biggest thing was, can we find 50 to 60 people who we can employ at the level we need? And that was one of the biggest impediments. They finally overcome that hurdle, and they are coming to Fort Edward. This is public information, just came out. IDA's received an application, we'll start working on, at the next board meeting, for a pilot form. So that's going to be a major shot in the arm for Fort Edward. And but the governor was going to make an announcement next week. The governor decided not to do it. He said, just tell everyone. So, but that's coming in. But it is a project. But just to reinforce Laura, their concern was, can we get the people we need to do the jobs we need at the skill level we need? And we hear other areas of concern, such as machinists and plumbers and some of the high-tech computer manufacturing operators that people are still looking for. So added to that, we may have people, but there's also training problems, making sure they have the skills they need to do it. So these are all things that we all need to look at and deal with and find some solutions to it. So it's not just going out and finding companies or organizations to either come here or expand here or whatever. And that's going to take a larger lift from all our organizations. And we just thought this conversation is good to start now instead of waiting till a later date.
Most people take, and if you talk about economic development, the first thing they think is the attraction aspects, the things that grab the headlines. That not only includes Joe Lunchbucket, but politicians and others. I've always had a belief, and I know it's shared by others in this room, that probably 80% of an economic developer's job is retention. Closing that back door and preventing what you've already got here from leaving, and no matter how hard you do that, 5% of them are going to leave anyways. So what kind of challenges, Ed, are you seeing as it may be to retention, not only in the city in Queensbury, but also in the North Country?
I think that's where your site visitations are important to the large employers in the region, right down to the mom and pa's in the area. So as a result of that, that becomes opportunities to discuss what are their concerns and problems. And again, that may be simply as talking to the locality about increasing the size of water pressure because of the lack of their insurance is too high and they don't have enough water pressure for sprinkler systems on the area, or permitting with DOT to more complicated areas such as Laura worked with Irving Tissue with the sewer and the rail issues that they had over there, and we've tried to do the same on a number of projects, or working with Flowmatic. Flowmatic had an expansion of 15 to 20 there, one of the largest manufacturers of valves in the world. Yet it took a period of over 3 years to sit with them and educate them on the various programs that were able to go to their board of directors to go through the program. And currently we're working on very healthy nutritional ice cream facility in the region that is looking to do some major expansion.
No, it has no calories, right?
Low calories. And they're looking to do major manufacturing with some contracts that they have. And so we spent yesterday talking with them as to the various options. They're looking for new space, equipment, how the taxes, the equipment is all coming from Holland. Basically, Holland and Netherlands are very specialized equipment that they need. And so that's a retention. They're going to hire anywhere from 50 additional people for this facility. So the point that you're making is retention. You want to try to expand, and then you want to try to grow. So those are kind of the three buzzwords that we kind of utilize internally here. That retain is number one, trying to expand that current business, and also try to grow by attracting new businesses into the area. And again, that's where the infrastructures count. Washington County is blessed with a rail system. That's very important as people look for infrastructure. We happen to have a different type of infrastructure. We have Interstate 87. And when the site selectors go to ESD, they send out to Laura and I and everybody else the requirements. They put right at the top, what their infrastructure needs are, along with the water and sewer and so forth. So those become very key, and that's an important positive that we have in the area, and we want to continue to work with there. We've had a joint cooperative group meeting between the Fort Edward, Washington County Sewer District, as well as Glens Falls Sewer District, to see how we can collaborate and see how we can develop an improved system that will allow Kingsbury to expand in their area and determine where the flow is going to go to, whether it's going to go Glens Falls and Fort Edward, and vice versa. So that's a collaborative effort that is going on right now with supervisors from Kingsbury, Hudson Falls, Fort Edward, and Glens Falls, and Kingsbury.
And Laura, what kind of retention challenges do you have going on right now in Washington County?
Well, Nick had a question before that.
If I may, what was I want to go back to something that you, one of the biggest successes. What was the biggest single issue in urban tissue here?
I think there's an existing facility and workforce.
I thought it was what was done with the IDA, or Washington IDA.
They modernized.
Huh?
They modernized
They're
it.
modernized,
Yeah,
sure,
yeah.
but they would not have looked at it if there had not been an existing facility here, and you started from scratch.
And as far as the people are concerned, we had all kinds of paper mills, pulp paper mills here, so we got, that was taken care of somehow. So it was,
I'm not diminishing the role, I'm just saying that Scotty Tissue One was a very well-known
Yes, no question.
role, and the Irvings are not going to, they're very sharp.
Yes, they are.
Family, and so forth. So I think it was a combination of you, the IDA, the Warren Washington IDA, assisting to make sure that did happen.
that was my point.
Yeah.
That was my point.
Sure, yeah.
There were two main issues,
Right.
and one was just that. The old man would never have come here without his tax base. Never, as far as I could see, and I was there during that time. So there's I guess what I'm trying to do is get back to another point, and that is working together on people, on money, on the kinds of things that you do. How do we do that to make sure that we attract these people?
My focus is Warren County.
Yeah, I understand.
I will assist all the time other communities, south and east of me, but my focus is Warren County.
And we've made our own bed here. We've made a practically unapproachable bed, and that's something you and I discussed many times. Part of what our people here are paid by the county to do what they should do in their county and in their municipality. At least three of them are here at this table today. We are not. We make our own money, one way or another. Oh, just one way. Not doing some work for them. So
I don't know what you mean by that.
how do we overcome all this?
Well, I think there's more, just because we're an advocate for Warren County, Laura's for Washington County, that doesn't mean we collaborate on issues where we can be helpful. I mean, we're not fighting like Saratoga County is fighting between SEDC and
that's
Saratoga
true.
Prosperity.
Yeah.
We get along, we have some friendly rivalries and so forth. But again, we cooperate very much with Lake Champlain, and Lake George has been a big assistance over the years in working with them. Every 5 years they have to do an economic update, as well as that we have collaborated with Lake Champlain, Lake George on some other programs over the years. And it all started when every federal application years ago, back in the late 70s and 80s, had to go through Bill Davidson in Lake Champlain, Lake George as an 95 review. They had
Right.
to sign off on an application that went through.
And do you remember that first question on that application?
Yes.
Is this in keeping with an overall master plan? I want to put my question back to Laura about, let's go back to retention, and we'll talk about some of these others. So do you, and you don't need to get specific, but do you see any major retention issues in Washington County right now, and especially a way that the IDA could come in and help and assist, even if it's with not the typical pilot or other incentives that they can provide, or investments?
The particular company that I'm thinking of that I do see as a red flag for a retention issue, they're currently recruiting in California and Florida, trying to bring people here because they can't find the workforce. But to kind of go back to the earlier question, having said that economic development and what it means has changed a lot over the years, one of the things that I see, at least, is that it is morphed a little bit more into a cross between economic development and community development. So in order to retrain and attract that workforce, they have to want to live here, they have to have places to go, things to do, they have to have adequate housing. So workforce housing is a community issue that, again, somebody looking to expand their business or bring their business here, because workforce all across the United States is so hard to come by, the more they can offer their employees, the better chance they are going to have to attract the kind of employees that they want on their payroll. So, having said that, I do have an idea that I think is something the IDA could consider. One of the things that we do not have in Warren and Washington County right now is a land bank. There are a very limited number of land banks that are allowed across the state. There is still room for more. Basically what land banks do, typically, they take properties that end up at tax auction from counties. You have an entity that acquires and agrees to redevelop those properties. Generally, they're blighted properties. They're areas in a community. They could be commercial, they could be housing, but they are properties that are keeping a community from, they're hindering growth, basically, or creating a reputation. So I checked with the state. It has not been done, but it is feasible if both counties were interested. Basically what would happen is it would require an intermunicipal agreement between the two counties to then retain the IDA as the operator of a land bank. The IDA would then acquire the property and then probably contract it out for redevelopment and then resell the property. Again, it could be housing purposes because IDAs can bond for housing. Or it could be, as again, both counties are largely about small business. The projects the size of Global Foundries are not likely to hit, nor am I really sure that either county would really want to see, growth that quickly, that kind of growth. But it could mean that you take a small Main Street building and turn it into office spaces, or it could be housing, or it could be a small manufacturing plant that, you've got somebody that's interested but doesn't have the money to do the development themselves. So again, it's an idea. It's not a panacea by any means, but currently there is no facility for communities that are experiencing a lot of blight, and I'm thinking Whitehall. I'm sure there are other communities in Warren County that if they had that resource, it might do something.
Travis, yes, so you...
Matt was actually first. He had his hand up
Oh, was he?
earlier, so I'd like to call on him.
I just, I'm involved in a lot of stuff, and a lot of these conversations are being had in all those different organizations, these meetings, the affordable housing, the workforce. I see it in my own community. Now, I've also have an extensive career in my own business, understand the need for a workforce and their need, the needs to support a workforce. What is if I was a company, I know that Warren and Washington County have a lot of attributes, especially the taxes in Warren County, and the infrastructure that's here. But the key thing is, if I need 50 or 60 people, where am I going to put them in? Horicon. If you don't start with a $300,000 home, you're not going to make it. It's not going to support it. You don't have a connection to, the communications needs, the broadband cell, the whole. But all these organizations, we're all talking about it in different places, but how do we actually got to figure out how to join all those efforts so that they're
Into
all
one.
aligned.
Right?
Into one.
Because it is. We can do what we can do here, offer these packages and pilots, incentives, but we got to figure out how to evolve with this. We have a special need here. I don't know where the 50. We've got openings for a CDL driver. We've gone through 3. We've had to go outside of our community. We've had applications as far as Fort Ann to find a qualified CDL driver at $23 an hour with state retirement, benefits, and we can't find them. We can't find laborers for $17 an hour to rake leaves. And if we can't address it, if we can't, distill it down to figure out how we can even fill those jobs, how are we going to make it attractive to somebody to come in and invest with $50 million or 100, with a need of 100 employees?
Travis?
On the idea of retention, I do think that the IDA has a role here. If we want to see this company stay here for a long period of time, we've got to make sure that they're not coming here just because of the incentives that we're offering expire in a few years. We've had examples where we've given out a lot of money, and the companies have just kind of hung on. Tribune Media, Patty Morris has been to the well 3 times. Outside this area, the chip plant hasn't done nearly what I think everybody hoped would happen with the chip plant. We got the Buffalo Billions, etc. So you got to make sure that what we're trying to attract here does fit long term for them as well, and it's not just the incentive that you bring here for a few years and then leave. I think that's an important role. I have no idea why a company with plants in Texas all of a sudden wants to come to Fort Edward, but I'm very glad to hear that WL Plastics wants to locate here. But I want to know
I think
more.
they have like 13 other plants, Travis, through the country.
Yeah,
Well,
but they're largely in the south, aren't they?
I can tell you the answer to that, because I got from Mike Dahl, who's a senior consultant. He was the owner and moved on. So anyhow, the answer is that they locate their plants. They need a 600-mile radius to make it cost-effective to move their equipment. So they looked at several sites. One was in Pennsylvania, one was here. No, I don't remember where the other one was. Forgive me. But they did that 600-mile radius to incorporate and overlap the other areas they have. So that's why they selected this area, or it would have been Pennsylvania.
Proximity to market.
Proximity to market.
Proximity to market.
They need a plan.
Transportation costs, but as importantly, if we had not provided the incentives that we are going to be talking about, they would have gone to Pennsylvania. They flat out said that. So
Really?
They flat out said that.
But also you've got rail. I mean, that was a big,
Rail, too.
requirement that they had.
We need to know why they would stay here long term, because the incentive is eventually going to go away.
We're in a high-cost state.
We are a high-cost state,
You got to level the playing field.
Kentucky, Texas, other places they are, but if they need to be up in the Northeast, I think Pennsylvania still has an edge over us. But, I also look at where can we find companies that might be in an area that's worse than what upstate New York looks like. There aren't too many. But if you did find that area where you could encourage people to come here because, hey, we're lower taxes, We've got, we're more open to industry, things like. Then you'd have a good shot at retaining these people as well. And the one area that comes to my mind, having been born and raised on Long Island, is Long Island. And you can't, you don't want to have face the problems that industry is facing down there. Nobody wants you. The taxes are, you think taxes are bad up here? I mean, you should try Long Island. So, when I look at that, I think we ought to be targeting that area as, we ought to be targeting commercial realtors down there. Not the Kellys, the Borgeses, the Sears up here that know this area very well, but some of the commercial real estate agents down there on Long Island, when their clients say, the town's pushing me here, pushing me there, I want to expand this. Well, did you ever think about upstate? And so I think that that there's an area to go ahead and look at, to look at realtors beyond the local set.
I think that's a good point to talk about, and I think one thing I'd like to lean on Jack after in a few minutes is how do companies really find where they're going to, and how do we find them? I think that's an important point, because I'm not as aware of that as other people are, and I sure know that a lot of the IDE board members didn't know that. But I want to get back to something that said. Yes, we fully understand that your primary allegiance is to Warren County. We fully understand that. But we are neighbors, and I think there's a lot of things we can do to help each other. I think we have two organizations sitting at this table, the Regional Planning Board and the IDA, who encompass our Regional Planning Board is a 5-county municipality as it's described, and the areas they can help, there's others we can help, so that we're helping each other and moving forward. And I'd like to see some way that we can build on each other's strengths. And yes, if we look at a plant in a company in Fort Edward or Hudson Falls or Kingsbury or Whitehall or wherever, that's going to be a benefit to Warren County. Because right now we have people that are in Fort Edward, they may live in Warren County, pay taxes in Warren County. So I think there's a lot of strengths putting together. And if some of the predecessors in Washington County Board of Supervisors had been a little smarter, we would have had the Northway over there. Way back when, coming right up Route 4. But vis-a-vis...
You didn't have the smart people there.
Warren County won.
You didn't have Dick Bartlett.
So anyhow, but let's not look at this as that we have Warren County or Washington County, we're going to fight together. We need to work together, and we need agencies to facilitate that.
No, Dave, I just wanted to make it clear, though, and I think we have to recognize that our responsibility, but that doesn't mean we do not continue to, work with the, the communities. But I think the biggest thing that we need to do, and Jack said it, and is that, yes, we want to look and bring other companies here, but we've got to make sure that firms like Finch Paper remain in this area.
Right.
600 plus jobs.
I bet you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning with a cold sweat thinking about that, don't you?
And so one of the things that EDC has worked on with National Grid is a $1 million grant that they got to help them modernize and improve their heating system, as well as getting a CFA where they reorganized their wood yard, created a new system of cutting the logs. So right now they have less logs, but having more productivity out of the paper there.
Right.
And they are fully integrated, one of the last few integrated mills in the country that goes from the logs to paper. They're a small portion of what IP does just up the road. So that industry not only is there, but also for the loggers out in the woods and the truckers. And one of the issues that the state is working with Finch and International Paper on is the worker compensation issues for the loggers in those areas. So all I'm saying is that is important in going just all through Warren County, seen and the same in Washington County. We can't overlook, it's a lot more sexier to stand out in the middle of the road and have a shovel, golden shovel, and welcome, a mini Amazon, not a large Amazon, into the area. But you can't forget these businesses in this area that have been here for a long time and need some help, and that's where you get that conflict. They read the paper and say, you know, Glens Falls idea, your idea, or whatever, gets an incentive to bring a new industry, and the guy says, geez, we've been here 125 freaking years, and we've not yet gotten a grant, or what's up?
But isn't that part of what we need to do, is reach out to these companies? and
We
say,
absolutely
In
do.
terms of, you're gonna spend $10 million in infrastructure?
Yeah.
We can give you a sales tax incentive? We can do other things, you know, there's other things that can't help.
Well, there's a lot of creative things
I think
that
it's
can be done.
messaging also.
I agree with you.
Okay, go ahead.
There's two, I'll give you two examples. One happened today. My wife went to a meeting about not-for-profits this morning. She's head of the table with a company from Argonne who does all of the contract work for McDonald's when they put up McDonald's places. Are we in contact with them all the time? Let them know that if you want to expand, we can expand it. More important than that, I'm going to mention something. I hope it never gets out of here, but I'm going to ask you to look. We have a newspaper here that is dying on the vine. They are 16 paper pages now, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. They just made a move that is it just opened my eyes. They hired a young man with two young kids from California who worked for a large family group of newspapers on the West Coast who specializes in buying papers for resort and ski areas. They send one of their relatives, who's been there 8 years, they send him all that way to become the general manager here. For what reason? To be the ad director? Not a bit. There's something going on. Has anybody talked to these people? Now, we all don't like them because they write bad things about us. But a good...
Except for Travis.
Except for Travis.
There ain't good things about us too, though.
His turn's coming.
But we need a good newspaper.
Travis, I couldn't help that.
But a good newspaper attracts all other, just like... My point is, we don't have a group, a cross-sectional group between you, and you, who say, hey, this is happening. Has anybody spoken to the new president of the Post-Star? Did you notice his job went from publisher to president? President of what? That's a sub-company. We should be talking to those people and find out how we can help. They're trying to sell their building. They're begging for somebody to come there and help them. Do they know that?
I think we just let them know.
Huh?
It's recorded.
I don't care.
I think we let them know.
But the point is, that when we talked about,
That's a very good point.
how do we have a marketing group cross-section that can go and sit down and talk to those people?
They
Somebody should.
probably reached out to Elise as you speak.
Who? Reach out, no way.
So,
No, seriously,
they wouldn't,
we don't, that's what we need.
No, that's a good point.
We need a cross-sectional group of all of us that meets relatively often and sees things like, what do you know? What do you know? What do you know? And then go talk to them. The Post-Star is going to go to 3 days a week before you can blink your eyes. And we all say, great, Ken Tingley should be fired. That's all well and good. But if we intend to bring more companies here, we better have a good
Yeah, but
newspaper.
you gotta include retention. You can't keep talking about bringing new
This
companies.
is retention.
Yeah, no, I know with the Post-Star, you
Yeah.
said bringing new companies.
So we should rephrase this to, we're looking to bring more growth to the area, no matter...
Yeah, and that growth comes from retention.
Retention is-
The majority of that growth is coming from retention.
Nick, what you just said, and I'm in agreement, that's a very interesting point. How about the hospital?
Hospital's another one. We're not involved in
No,
that
but
at
I
all.
mean, the one you're mentioning is the paper, and I'm thinking the hospital's a bigger issue, and it's along the same lines.
That's exactly right.
But the hospital might be at the top of our...
But is our group sitting down and talking with Bill Powers? Or Diane Chagrin?
EDC is...
I don't think so.
EDC is talking to the hospital.
Oh, you are?
Regularly.
Are we part of that? We should be.
John, you've had your hand
Well,
up.
there's confidential stuff going on.
I
so,
understand, but we're confidential too.
No, I
We
understand.
handle the same
I
things.
understand,
John?
I just wanted to mention one thing in terms of connection to retention is, I think what's happened over the last 5, 6, 7 years is new construction is very expensive. And I think we've all run into people who have hit sticker shock, realizing that buying a lot and then building it now is way more expensive than they thought it was going to be, or they were told it was going to be. So there's this emphasis now on existing buildings, and there's a shortage of them. Because we know from looking around that, when people are expanding or they're looking for additional space or a bigger space, they aren't seeing it or they're not finding it. There's a few places around, but they're kind of the same kind of retreaded places. So it's just a thought, because this is going on everywhere. But this is a role possibly the IDA can be assisted. Again, maybe looking at some creative ways of incenting stock and inventory of existing buildings that people can utilize for business growth, for industry growth.
We mentioned only Warren and Washington County, by the way. Are we forgetting about where the housing is going up faster than anywhere else? And that's Saratoga County in South Glens Falls.
So I had a conversation with Tori Riley. It was actually part of another project, but came around. They were just over in Ireland talking to Irish companies who had the research over there, and some of them were looking to come to the United States to do production. Now here may be, but what was said was some of them really couldn't afford Saratoga County, so maybe they help go to other areas. Now whether that's true or not, but I think that's something we look at, because you're right, Saratoga is expensive. Warren County is not quite as expensive, but still in some areas expensive. But Washington County is less. But the more we bring to the area, the more we're going to cross-populate and help retail and everything else in other areas. But that's part of the question, is should we be working more with Saratoga? Maybe not SEDC, but what's the other name? The growth?
Saratoga Prosperity.
Saratoga Prosperity. Do those relationships make sense? And I think that's part of the conversation. I don't know the answer to that.
Well, home builders are in South Glens Falls, as opposed to even here or your county. Much stronger now. The building, I see it, that's where the big building is going, in homes.
I found our discussion in the area that we've gone in kind of interesting, and if 6 or 7 years ago we were holding this conversation, I think, Ed, you'd be saying price of power, taxes in New York State. And I have found, and even with successes I've had in my career, that it goes back to, I think what was mentioned before, is that if companies didn't need to be here, they probably wouldn't be here. Ace and Target down at exit 16, if they hadn't opened up to a Northeast breakout of their product. State Farm Insurance is the regional office facility. Quad Graphics is regional as it relates to printing of Time magazine. And if those companies didn't have to be here, I really doubt that they would be. And so, while we do have, along with everybody else, the problems of workforce development, and I think that we identify these, and I think with what Dave's going to talk about of having a action group that's created, that at least once every 3 months that we can sit and share these kinds of discussions. Some of these other things that have haunted us for a while, and I worked 12 years for the old Niagara Mohawk, I still don't know why we can't provide a economic development pricing for power in New York State. There are ways to, getting different state programs with power authority power and different things like that, but it's not really meeting our needs. And so we aren't going to necessarily by ourselves change that, but I think then through our state organizations that can be continued to be brought up. A lot's been done to reduce taxes, but still we have a real bad black eye as it relates to that. I wanted to just throw out quickly and find out, and this is more of a personal question for me, is what kind of reaction and activity, if anything, are you seeing with the feds designating the opportunity zones? Ed?
Well, we have essentially the western side of the city of Glens Falls, kind of the South Street, which is in the DRI, and that extends out to Broad Street all the way to Western Avenue, where Walgreen is in CVS in Hannaford. And then also, we had applied for, on behalf of the town of Johnsburg, their opportunity zone, and of course that went to the governor, and then the governor sent that to the Department of Treasury. And now, as they just came out after a couple of years of designation, Jack, the final rules and regulations, and so now we're beginning to see more activity and interest. North Creek has a great opportunity, I believe, in a couple of areas to provide an opportunity zone. That is in the lodging area that would boast the ski industry, as well as in the area potentially of some housing, and that could encompass, there are some rules that permit an adjoining area to an opportunity zone to partake in that opportunity zone. And what the opportunity zone does is afford the investors a capital tax break. If they maintain their investment, there is no capital gain on their investment. If they pull out before the period of time, then it's prorated over the period. This was done in the mid-1990s. This was one of the very first few pieces of legislation that was bipartisan, supported by both parties in the House and the Senate, and by President Trump. And that was one of the more popular items. And then you have New York State with the SALT issue on the taxation on the income tax. But I think we're now gaining some momentum. Our goal here, it's a program that has nothing to do with the locality. It is something that the Department of Treasury rules on and works on, so that there's no local or state involvement or approval whatsoever. It's an internal revenue issue. Working with certain national banks that are involved, some investment firms that are involved, and some law firms that are involved specifically in this area, to be contacting their clients to see what they want to invest in.
So you are seeing some interest?
We are seeing some interest, for the first time in the last 2 or 3 months, to be honest with you.
Housing's a big one. Affordable housing is a big.
I know Ed's got to leave in a few minutes.
Yes, I've got a brownfield opportunity.
I'd like to...
Got a what?
Brownfield opportunity area.
And I have a board meeting.
Forum, and Laura's got a group.
I'd like to...
See, we're walking out the door together.
Well, there'll be a lot of rumors going around now, won't there?
Collaboration, isn't there? See?
So, anyhow, I do want to get back to the conversation but I do know that the IDA has special flexibility in distressed areas, opportunity zones being one, economic development areas being another, where we can do things to help with incentives that are a little more flexible, just not based on, it's not all based on job count anymore because of this distressed areas.
No, but it's a different opportunity zone. The IDA doesn't have the flexibility for the federal opportunity zone. That's a designation from the Department of Treasury.
Yeah.
They have it with the old Empire Zone, though, areas.
The Empire, yes, the Empire Zone is distressed. There is no more benefits given out from the Empire Zone. It's closed. But you still are, if you're an opportunity zone that's deemed /distress, which then flows into the general municipal law, which flows into the IDA.
So I want to have the conversation of, with that here, is this something you'd like to pursue, or as a group, put together some sort of steering group and start developing some ideas and action plans to do this? I'm just trying to reach out and see if it makes sense to people. Brian?
I got a question because Matt brought it up. He hears this everywhere, and I agree. What other groups are we lacking? Who else should be at the table? Because the way you brought that up, there's a lot of groups talking.
Well, that's what I was,
Who should be at the table?
What I was hoping that, to me, maybe I'm wrong, but it seems to be a roadmap that we need to put on a piece of paper that shows all the things that need to be addressed in a perfect world. And we need to figure out who's working on those issues, because we can't obviously work on everything. For economic development, but we can't get it. Affordable housing, that would be
Daycare.
Daycare, workforce development. Kathy Duffy, President Duffy had City of the Adirondack is involved in this. It's very important that our community college is supportive of whatever economic development we're doing, because it's all integrated. But if we're all having these conversations somewhere else and we're all going in different directions, are we really using
That's what he,
our
I think that's
resources?
what he's going after.
That's what we're going after, it's
Yeah.
because I think that,
So who are the other groups we need? I guess that's,
Yeah.
who do we need for that
I mean,
integration?
there's a multitude of, I mean, you can start with the community action from an affordable housing point of view. I think you got to break down the topic and see what interest groups from on affordable housing. You're talking about the Community Action Agency, NAACP, and other organizations that assisting those at low income. Glens Falls Housing Authority, Bob Landry, that does the Section 8 housing in Warren, Washington, northern Saratoga County. You have some other affordable housing operations. Certainly,
Reynolds Homefront,
Who's
senior
that?
housing.
Who's that?
just
senior housing.
just as I sort of look at it, there may be sort of like a core group that starts at the top, and out of that, there might be different filters based on what we're going after, that different people are come into play, so.
Yeah, right.
It may be like a spoke with different wheels, or spurs coming off it. So Beth was up.
Well, I just wanted to say, Ed had mentioned earlier, every 5 years we have to update our comprehensive economic development strategy, which encompasses the economic development needs of our 5-county region. Everything that's being said here is also true in Hamilton County, it's true in Essex County, and it's true in Clinton County. We're going to start that effort next year with our new economic development coordinator, and I think that that would be a really good place and a good way to get all these groups together talking about the issues, because really what the strategy is supposed to lay out is what are our economic development needs for the next 5 years that we can relay to the federal government, the Economic Development Administration, for grant efforts on a federal level as well, and it can be utilized for state grants as well. I know we have the RADCs. Our region is cut between 2 RADCs. But anyways, I guess I would just like to offer up that when we start pulling that effort back together and getting that group back together, there's a pretty comprehensive steering committee that's actually part of the creation of that SEDS. So I think that would be a good mechanism.
Okay, Nick,
No.
Bruce,
I just had a quick question.
I saw you, you was first.
Is it, or can you produce a map
The city has.
or?
What, sorry? Hello?
Can you produce a map for the edification of the IDA members, and myself in particular, where these zones overlap? I mean, I worked...
Opportunity zones, you mean?
Yeah, I was chairman of the
There's
Empire
only
Zone.
one opportunity zone in Washington County, and that is the entire town of Fort Edward.
Huh?
There are 2 opportunity zones in Warren County. One is in the city of Glens Falls, one is in Johnson.
What about the Empire Zone? It has some effect on... what we-
Empire zones only affect the IDA in terms of I guess, a designation of eligibility.
Can you
There's
give us a
no
map
benefit.
someday, that's just so we have in front
That's
of us?
through the city of Glens Falls that spreads into South Glens Falls and into the Fort Edward, Hudson Falls area, kind of like a span.
Bruce?
Yeah, there's actually like 6
I've got all the maps.
opportunities. I mean,
Ed sent me the maps for the economic development, Empire Zone, old Empire Zone.
Maybe you could give
I got
them,
Warren County, I have Washington counties also.
maybe you could duplicate it for...
The IDA park is all one big old Empire Zone.
Right.
There's 7 Empire Zones in Washington County. I think it was 6, yes, 6 in Warren County. So it was really more than I thought there was.
Now, before they jump up and leave, traditionally the IDA has offered financial support to projects of recruitment or promotion, but I don't think Washington County has come to us in several years at least with something where they're doing a promotional project and, needed help. I mean, that's...
no, the IDA has helped some companies in Washington County.
I'm not talking about helping companies, I'm talking about helping you promote the area, or our, not you and, the LBC and Parking Lot. So that, I still think that there's something that we can do, because we've got more money in our account than
Well, that's good, because I don't have any of that.
I don't want to
Mike, just a couple of quick comments, because I know people have to leave, but I agree with the statements earlier about the IDA not buying property. I don't think it's the best use of our assets. But what I heard today was this long-term plan of bringing different groups together, but only one is a short-term actionable thing, and that's retention. It always breaks my heart when I find out that a company is leaving the area, right? Because it hurts our economy as a whole. So I'm wondering what we can do in the short term to help with like the Post-Star, maybe not the hospital, even though that's high on my list too, right? But what can we do to retain? Because if we lose one, it's going to be maybe years before we get somebody to replace them. And that should be our utmost priority, at least in my mind. So what can we do along those lines? And I think I'd like to maybe come up with some kind of thought in terms of where we go next.
Well,
Really? Just get out and...
I think another area we can do is use a vehicle of the ARCC, because they have a lot of distribution channels and information that we can get places and get information out, or do talks at their meetings or something like that. So there are different ways we can do it to reach people. But that has to be incorporated with individual places also, individual visits.
The ARCC should have an idea of who immediately, or maybe, maybe somebody could go right out.
Okay, Brian?
My one question is, the only thing we haven't talked about, we've talked about groups, municipal organization, nonprofit. How about the private sector? Is there a private sector that should be included in this? Like the Skimmerhorns of the world that actually build housing? Is there room for that? Is there a place for that? Or am I totally off? I don't know. I'm just
I think that's
asking.
kind of what David is kind of getting at with the spokes. Like Skimmer would be great to have on your, affordable housing, but, do those kind of things, I think, is helpful to tie in that here.
Somebody that understands what goes into all that. Okay.
The whole process.
But I mean, we haven't talked much about the private sector being involved, but I think that's an important part.
And I think
Is
if
the
you
private sector being
broaden
involved?
out, then you have regional organizations such as the Center for Economic Growth out of Albany, that's run by Andrew Kennedy.
Yep.
You have the Business Council by Henry Verchetti, that has come up and spoken to the area as well. So those organizations, and they basically have Business Council, a staff of like 20 that have experts in each of these particular areas that we can utilize them to come up on particular topics, whether it's economic development, whether it is labor issues, things like this that have been helpful as a resource to EDC in terms of getting information.
So we also talked to Betty Little and Dan Stack, and they're interested in, I just sort of rambled on, I saw Betty at a calling hours yesterday, I sort of rambled on what we're meeting about today, and she really liked the idea. She wanted Keith to come, but Keith couldn't make it. I talked to Dan Stack after that, I talked to Betty, I better talk to Dan.
And we also need Kerry Warner involved as well from Warner.
Right. So what I'm getting is there is a sense that we can start to move forward and take a look at what we can do as a joint venture and facilitate some of these things. Is that what everyone else heard?
So Dave, can I also comment? Unless I'm wrong about this, my understanding of the Opportunity Zone legislation is because it took the IRS 2 years to actually figure out how it's really going to work, the maximum benefit afforded investors into an Opportunity Zone fund, which is what's required to invest in the area, was 2019. Which means that unless the legislation changes, the dividend payback, just like an IDA pilot, starts reducing over time. So a concerted marketing effort to create like an investment profile of why somebody might want to invest in Fort Edward or the 2 opportunity zones in Warren County. That's something that, as you're making calls on companies in the area, you say, who do you know that you might like to have next door to you? Because we have an opportunity to help incentivize them to be there. But the longer that progresses, the benefit reduces.
I think that, I thought that aspect of the Opportunity Zone was going to be the primary. I think because we've they put these short lease deadlines on, is that a company which starts up here, and as long as they stay in existence and then liquidate after 10 years or sells to someone else, that capital gain in the increased value of the company becomes not subject to capital gains.
If they hold
al-
it for 10
also.
years.
10 years.
So I think that's really going to be the big benefit, even though I'm told by my national organizations that there's more money in the opportunity funds than there are projects.
Yeah.
And communities are now starting to actually put prospectus together for their opportunity zones to be able to deliver, to say, this is an area we've designated for workforce housing or retail or industrial or whatever, so.
And the disadvantage is we have limited specific geography, so it's not as if we can say, come to anywhere in Warren County or anywhere in Washington County.
Right.
They have to go to targeted areas.
And one of the other things that investors now are doing is creating essentially a mutual fund for
Right.
pure investors. Instead of investing in one particular territory, they're investing in a mutual fund that has a segment of money in respective opportunities that may give us actually more, because there's like 5,000 opportunity zones in the country, and there's I think 500 500 to 600 in New York. I mean, all of Long Island, the city, Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse. There's a heavy competition, and again, it comes down to what resources that we have. Like Gore Mountain is undermanned as far as lodging goes in that particular.
And Dave, I'm going to conclude my comments here so that we can bring things around, and if anybody wants to chime in afterwards. And, we talked about how economic development is going to be delivered in the future. When I first got involved, it was the public county executives or others, or the chambers that were taking and delivering economic development. And then the public-private partnership came together. And I think we're now seeing a third leg to the stool being added, and that being academia. There's more and more federal funds, especially, that are flowing down through the educational systems. So to answer your question earlier, someone that should be here is definitely the community college, because that's a great benefit that you have and also should be using.
So one of my thought processes, the next step from here was to get more of the potential players together, include more of the boards of supervisors together, because they have ideas. I've heard feedback from them also. SUNY ACC and other players to put it in there, so that's one of the ideas I had, and we'll flesh that out a little bit more. But Ed and Laura, thank you for coming.
Well, thank you very much.
Appreciate that.
Great
Sorry for
opportunity
running.
for dialogue. Sorry to run out, but
That's right.
Now you're going to go out and put some real
now Laura and I are going to go collaborate and figure out, conspire here.
Probably leave us out.
Before we get there, Jack, one of the things that I want to address that is, how do areas find companies or find people interested in moving the area? Travis asked about contacting commercial real estate agents in Long Island. How do companies find the sites? What's the process that we go through if we took that tack to go there?
Right. And Travis, that's a very good observation that you gave. As a matter of fact, a few years ago, there was a company that took and modified trucks for municipal purposes that were on Long Island. Their main thing was that they just couldn't get the quality of the workforce and people to pass the, as I call it, the P-test for drugs and et cetera. So we ended up putting them up in Bob Barber's old plastic recycling building over in the Fort Edward Industrial Park. And there was some modifications and things that need to get done. There was a period of time when Senator Schumer had a very active program where companies were leaving Long Island for the reasons that you stated, but they were going to northern New Jersey. And Schumer and his office was really pushing big time to say, you could still go to upstate New York. For one reason or another, that lost quite a bit of steam. I think that the best way to take and get the word out to the outside world and commercial real estate people is to get our properties listed in a multiple listing system. And there's a number of these that can be made available that gets that word out there. I still think that our audience, our people that we're going to be needing to go after, aren't necessarily people outside the area. I would really like to see us cultivate the companies that we've already got here, because that takes care of retention, but try to get them to add 3 or 4 additional people. And I think that, we and I'm not rambling here, that we've identified a lot of these problems, but I haven't heard the solutions to workforce development or workforce housing. There are solutions to it, and I think we have to call upon the private sector, who will benefit the most as a result of that. So they definitely need a
We could also
seat at
include
the
the
table.
Workforce Development Board in some work groups, because they are consistent of private sector.
There's one concept that I'm working on right now in Lake Placid, where the hotels have gotten together and they don't have enough housing for their J1 visa people that come in during the summer. So another gentleman and myself are putting a proposal together whereby the private sector will come in and build the facility, but in order to get the financing, they got to have some kind of backup guarantees. So if XYZ Hotel will guarantee 5 apartment units for a 10-year time period, and you go down through, etc., then that problem goes away. But you got to become creative in your approach to take and do it.
Fulton County IDA actually hired a site selector to come in and sit down with them and go through the entire county and figure out, here's the advantages, here we are. But the reason they went with site selectors is because a lot of companies are turning to site selectors versus commercial real estate agents to help them find the spots. So site selectors will start cataloging the areas, and they'll have them in the spots. So that's one resource we can use. ESD is another resource we can use, because they hear about companies looking to be interested in areas. There's other New York State organizations also that we can reach out to help get our message out once we know what our message is. And I think that one person I talked to, I can't remember who it was, said, you know something? You could go after the 500-person company. But I can tell you, you better be damn well ready to take them and service them and get them up here, because they're not going to wait 2 to 5 years for you to get ready for them. You better be ready for them now.
Well,
they're going to move now.
And based upon that, I mean, we could have the best workforce housing, we can have the best qualified workforce, but unless we've got sites, being a salesperson, and that's what I kind of refer to myself as a salesperson, as I think, John, you wear that same kind of hat, is if you don't have a site for people to go to, and I'll tell you, the day and age of going out to an open field and telling them to squint, and now imagine we've got some roads and there's some fire hydrants, etc., that just isn't going to be happening. Now, you don't put the infrastructure in the ground, and that's called shovel-ready light, L-I-T-E, but that you can have the plans and things in place so that when the company does nod their head, that you're able to pull the trigger, have the infrastructure and backup support in place by the time the company has their building built.
Or they are looking for an existing building,
And
because they don't want to wait to build.
And John, you and Ed had I thought, a very innovative approach back a few years ago, where I think you took the trolley and invited the commercial real estate
Yep,
people.
yeah, we did a little,
You toured them all around, and you bought them lunch, and et cetera. I think I know about a lot of the sites, but when I do start looking into it, I find out, well, maybe that natural gas line isn't large enough, or the three-phase power line, yeah, it's out there, but there's no capacity in it. Those are the things that we still have to refine and get the site shovel-ready light, so that you've got something to take and promote.
My question for both Jack and Ed, how many companies relocate in the Northeast every year?
In or out?
Not too many. So, the point is if we're gonna try to invest in a shovel-ready site or a shovel-light-ready site, the likelihood of us getting a return probably isn't very high.
You're more
So-
likely to get an expansion, or somebody says,
And-
we've just made an acquisition of a company, or we're considering an acquisition, what sites do you have out there that could possibly, it's more the who is here, or who has a relationship to this area.
That's why I keep on going back to how important retention is for us.
Oh, yeah.
Retention, expand existing,
Sorry.
but going after and trying to find new companies is like, I don't know, going to Vegas with $1,000 in your pocket, and hoping to come home with more, right?
You know, the question earlier was, how do these projects happen? It's as simple as we got a call the other day from a company in Washington County that was interested in looking at the lots at the industrial park. And we talked a little bit, but his real interest is, he's got a friend in New Jersey that wants to move up here. And, you know, that's where I said before that as a result of this meeting that we've had here today, because we've talked economic development, it's up on our agenda much higher, you're going to go home and you're going to talk to mother-in-law out in Spokane or wherever, and they're going to say, you know, I got a buddy here who saw the TV commercials on that New York's the place to go. Are what they're saying really true? I mean, those are I've been to literally dozens and dozens of trade shows. We never created a job as a result of it. It's through that interrelationship that you have with people that you're working with.
There's another good resource we can use, I don't think we use it enough, is our tourists.
Yes.
I can name 5 companies off the top of my head who came to Washington County, or they're all Washington County, so I'll say that, who came up or visited the area, fell in love with the area, either bought a vacation home or rented a vacation home, kept on coming up, finally decided they're going to move their business up here. And we got one established factory in Washington County that went out of business. That's going to be most likely sold to a company from New Jersey who was up here looking around here and just fell in love with the area and wants to come up. He's going to bring his business up here. So I think that's an area that we need to figure out how can we tap into that area, because how many visitors we come to Lake George or Washington County or Warren County or skiing or whatever we can tap into. So
I think that goes back to Laura's point of economic development is community development. So if we have communities that people want to come to, a lot of that has to do with broadband access. A lot of people are now working from their homes. They have their own businesses. They would live up here full time if they had reliable broadband and cell service to be able to run their businesses. Then they're here, they're spending money at the restaurants, they're shopping at our grocery stores, and they're not commuting back and forth from, down by the city, but they're actually living here. So that has to go with the community development aspect of we need to make communities that people want to live in, and that I think that's the demographic that we're getting towards up here when you have all these small, nice hamlets with their great cafes and they have a farmer's market and all that. People want to live like that now. So, they can't be done in vacuums.
I tell you, the town of Hampton, who has no coffee shops, it's got 2 restaurants and 2 motels and 1 RV sales place. 35 to 40% of the properties are owned by people from outside of Warren, Washington County, California, New York, New Jersey. And they are telling me, and have been telling me for 8 years, and working on it for 8 years, is we need broadband. We need broadband because we want to work more out of our home. And finally, broadband's coming. Acceptable broadband. So those things are important, and those people are maybe spurting off other people and other friends to come up and buy more properties. So it is their price. But we're getting
John, do you have
broadband.
anything to add? Because we haven't heard a lot.
Well, no, I was just gonna throw in one story. It's about 4 years ago. We had a call from a prospect that looked at what was then the former vacant native textile building in Cary Park. And the reason they liked it is because they were looking for an existing building. The fellow happened to vacation on Lake George, and he owned a business in New Jersey. And this is LED lighting on the helmets. He happened to be in that business. He walked through the building and said, "This is perfect. This is absolutely perfect." How do we get? So we had our state representatives there. We were there. Long story short is we got outbid by New Jersey because Chris Christie wouldn't let him go. But that happens. That's not under our control. It was more along the lines of he made such a big offer again on the incentive side to retain him. He wouldn't let him leave New Jersey, especially not to New York. At the time, it was so. But that's an example of how the lake can become its own little eco-structure up there. People who are coming in and out of this county, or both counties, on a regular basis, that either have businesses, run businesses, or retired from businesses, and those are the people who have a connection to this area, and would start something up. And we've got examples of medical devices. People came here because they like the vacation here. So we have this advantage, huge advantage, that nobody else has, which we got to use that more. And it's hard to drill into that world because you don't want to be invasive, but at the same time, you want to get the word out that you can do business here, not just visit here.
We also have to look at the co-founder of Wayfair.
Co-founder of?
Wayfair.
Yeah.
Some people know what Wayfair is, but that's online furniture.
Yep, right.
Buy anything you want for your home and all of this stuff, and it's right on your door.
Yep.
He bought quite a big piece of property on Clones Point on Lake St. Catherine. He has built a 50-bedroom place for 50 people to stay, and he brings people in. So, long story short, he was looking at buying the old Greenlawn College. The fall-down position was the fact that the transportation wasn't good enough for him. But it doesn't mean he won't find another use for it, but that's a person who we could possibly reach out to and say, we've got stuff over here, there's something you'd like to do over here. So, just something like that. There's resources we can tap into that we don't think of sometimes.
But there's our job then to put together something so that when these people come here, we get them
But the IDA or the EDC or
together.
Or networks.
Washington County can't do it alone. We
Right.
can't do it alone.
Into the lake association.
We could do it through the realtors in Lake George. We could do it, but we got to first we got to have something to sell, and then find somebody to sell it.
We do have something to sell.
I know.
It's our region,
I'm
right?
talking about
It's your quality of life.
Something that we get to them.
There's a spot, I don't know if it's in Speculator or Indian Lake or one of those towns, that when you leave town, there's a sign that says, if your business was here,
Yes.
you'd be home by now. I'm not sure exactly where that
Yeah,
is.
but I've seen
Why don't we
it.
put one of those up on the Northway?
Or the
Or two or
visitor
three
center,
or
right?
four, or the visitor center. Or when you enter Lake George.
Right, or in the visitor center of Lake George.
So,
Multiple places.
Jack,
The Air
what else do you think we need to touch on?
I think we've hit a pretty good gamut, and anything after this, we're just getting a little punch drunk. But there's one thing, though. There are sometimes things that happen just outside of our control, or that we need to get a good answer on. And basically, I look at economic development as not only the job creation, the retention, but it's the healthcare that we have here, delivery system, school systems that we've got. I've never met an economic developer that hasn't said that their community doesn't have a good quality of life. The only difference is I've never had to sell our quality of life, because every major four-color publication at one time or another has done a story on Southern Adirondacks and Saratoga Springs, etc. But I think what we need to be careful, and we need to be bringing these people to the table, is, especially in this day and age of Google or Bing or whatever, what's going on with the Glens Falls Hospital. People will see that, and if they're looking at 2 or 3 different places where they want to go and have their families live there, and etc. There was something I heard on the radio today, and God forbid that the New York Times picks it up, that Warren County has the highest incident of cancer in New York State, and they're conducting a major investigation into that. Now, whether it's true or not, or whether it's, fake news, or however you want to call it, but it's those kinds of things that you've got, that could really dissuade people that may be hot on our area.
So,
Fake news. Mike, what you ought to do is bring that forward to what you're talking about, to the tourism department.
Oh,
When
I
they make
will.
those tourism
Wrote down.
advertisements, maybe that's a tagline that could be in there.
so,
Yeah, I think so.
if anyone's got any ideas or, thoughts from today,
Happy to talk to you about that.
you can get a hold of me, the IDA, or most people know how to find me. So, and we'll coordinate, we'll move on forward from here, and I really thank people for coming. And I appreciate your effort. Bruce, did you have something?
I was just gonna say, part of my past life was promoting agriculture. Meeting's been an hour and a half, but agriculture never came up, and that's it. With the possible exception of an ice cream facility. And I think we better not be ignoring the potential. I have a neighbor who sent his son off to college, and when he came back, he said, I want you to go to work for a year or two. I don't want you to come on the farm. Then he did come back to the farm and said, Dad, let's build a creamery. And you go by my neighbor's farm now, there's about 10 refrigerated trucks parked in the yard, and so there's a lot of potential in agriculture. I asked John Irving at the opening of the Irving plant, couldn't you come here and open a potato chip factory, because they make the nature. But I don't know.
Well, we lost a bundle of work when the yogurt went into Fulton County and beyond.
Yeah.
We didn't even fight it.
We do have one yogurt company, but we can't get them there.
So again, thank you all for your time,
Thank you.
and
Thanks for
lean on you.
Fine.
Thanks, Corey. Here's the deal.
Adjourned.